So I just posted a message about the prophecy and the cycle of good land, slavery, and deliverance. And I started that message by talking about how I was sitting down with my grandpa and I learned from the history of the family. So we wanted to do a separate message and talk about that, the tribal relations, sitting down with the elders and really learning from those who have gone before you. Because in the world we live in today, this culture of separation and distance, something that we've lost is the tribal relations. People no longer stay close to their parents. The grandchildren don't get to sit down and have that influence and the impact of the seasoned veterans of the family. And so you can see how we've lost so much of the value of the elderly. You put the grandpa in the old folks' home, you put the grandma in the nursing home, and you might go back to visit once a month, maybe once every other month, if that. But as far as staying united in a tribe is something that have significantly disappeared in the last few decades.
hmm And it's important to understand the benefit of the tribal connection. After all, it is ancient humanity's record. There is nothing more impermanent than the current state of affairs in the family, because that is not what humans have ever done, and at least on the level that they do it today. In the Western world, which is probably the main arbiter of this philosophy, is get up and get out and get away. And it's not because your family's bad, by the way. Just get up, get out, and get away. And do it as fast as you can. There's this urgency to kick them out as fast as you can. Well, I hate to tell you, but humans are not birds. That may work for birds, but you're not a bird. You're not a bird. And there are things, and there are certain animals in the animal kingdom, like the baboon, pretty much is one of the few that keeps that baby with them forever. You know, relationships matter, and the human not should not be compared with the animals. Rather, it's what's similar to some and what's dissimilar with others. You're not animal. You are human, with animal components and animal parts, animal similarities, but you're not animal. Animal is not human. They may have some animal part, some human parts, and some human similarities. A man is not a woman. It may have some woman parts and some woman similarities. A woman is not a man, may have some man parts, some man similarities, because we both have testosterone and estrogen. But the level that distinguishes us from each other is whichever one is dominant makes us what we are. Just because you're similar doesn't make you a woman. Some men, particularly white men, have long hair like white women. Doesn't make them a woman, does it? No. They have eyes. Doesn't make them a woman. They may be the same height, rarely, but that doesn't make them a woman. You may find things, the main thing that makes them different is the lactating breasts for nursing their babies and the womb for bearing one. Man doesn't have a womb. And we definitely don't have the same appendages. Now, on a chemical level, we're entirely different, aren't we? There are certain proclivities and tastes, and attributes and characteristics, mental, emotional, and spiritual, that are unique to a female that are not to a male. Oh, there is some measure of each and both, but it is not the dominant thing that sets them apart, distinguishes them, makes them who they are. That's not a bad thing. That's a natural thing. And tribalism is natural. And we're constantly bucking against our natural order, our natural law, as John Locke perhaps would articulate. Sticking together as a unit. And that's on the tribal level of the family. You expand that to, from family comes community, not the other way around. So you go to the community. And from the community comes the nation. And then perhaps from the nation comes the species. No matter what nation, we're all special human. And each of those are unique differences, distinctions that allow us to function because we're each doing our part. After all, the hand is not doing what the foot is doing, the foot's not doing what the butt is doing, the butt's not doing what the mouth is doing. We're all a part of the unit, but we all serve our purpose. We're not jealous of the other parts or envious of the other parts, because it's the sum of the parts that make the whole what it is. You don't have to convert yourself to something else. Be and play the role that you are in. The family unit has a role. We call it the patriarchy, the matriarchy. There's a role. The elders, those, the sages, and the respect that we have, the care and the protection for the legacy, the posterity, the children and the babies. And everybody gives their life and their time for the sake of the children and the babies, because without that, you would have no future. You would just die in that one generation. So you only propel yourself by giving yourself spiritually, physically, mentally, socially, to the posterity.
And you see that in the older generations, the past generations, how they used to have so many children. And, if you're looking through modern goggles, it doesn't make sense. You're thinking, well, how can they afford it? Second, how could they have the time? I got 2 kids and I barely have any time to do anything. Well, because you're not using the method God provided. You're trying to do it on your own while holding 2 jobs and a mortgage and a dog. But when you actually understand the tribal approach, well, you're not alone. You got grandma and grandpa and uncles and nieces and cousins, and everybody's together raising up a child. It's an entire project. It's a tribal mission to raise up one child, because they need to have all of these different inputs, different perspectives, different experiences, people that have been through stuff that could educate that child how to walk, how to talk, where to go and where not to go. So, I spoke about my great grandpa. He had, there were 11 of them. And when my great grandpa died, well, the community in all Jerusalem of Jews, that was one of the tasks of the community to provide for that family. So what they did, like I said, they distributed the children to different educational facilities where they would be provided for. They didn't neglect them. They were all one united community back in the day. But now, forget the community. You're divided within your own home. You're fighting with your brother, your sister, your spouse. You talk about world peace. You don't even have peace in your home. How are you going to have peace with your neighbors, let alone within the nation, let alone within the world?
Well, I am my brother's keeper. And remember, when you have multiple children, by the time you have your second child, depending on if it's 3 or 4 years after the first, that child is helping you with the first. Now you've got 4 children or 5 children. They become now contributors to the family. Mom doesn't have to juggle 4 things. She's got one vacuuming, one taking out the trash, and one holding the new baby and rocking it to sleep while she's making dinner. Actually, the more children she has, the less work she has to do. You forgot that part of it. The more children, the less work any one person has to do. The burden is now proportioned or portioned out to a workable measure. Now, one is doing this, and one is doing that, and one is doing this, and it frees you to do more. In fact, it frees everyone to do more because you've got more doing things that only if one person was there has to do 4 different jobs.
Well, but that only works if you're using the tribal method, because see now, the more children you have, each one is chasing their own dream, each one is hanging out with their own friends, each one is getting into his own trouble.
My father often said you can play amongst yourselves. You don't have to go out to try to find some strange neighbor's kids. You can play amongst yourselves. And most of our growing up, we played amongst ourselves. We played amongst ourselves. He didn't trust too many people in the community, particularly when you're African American living in a kind of a white community. My father was successful financially enough in his business that he was able to afford a very expensive house. And there wasn't many of our people living in that neighborhood. But we could play amongst ourselves. We could entertain ourselves. We could help each other. And the chores got split. One's doing one thing, one's mopping, one's sweeping, one's doing the yard. Sometimes we did the yard together. I had a pastor, he had 14 kids. And I don't think I've ever seen that man frown or his wife. 14 kids. They could sit back and just watch the kids work. You know, it's beautiful. And the kids create amongst themselves social skills of dealing with different personalities. Remember, you got 14 kids. Well, they never go out. Well, why? You are a sample of society. You're learning how to deal with your sisters, your brothers, the mean one, the nice one, the one not so smart, all kinds of different things. You're learning social skills within a safe environment, not put in a school, a college, a university with a bunch of weirdos and strangers, and God knows some of their families and where they come from, and all of they start hitting you, then you go into what you call peer pressure. No such thing as peer pressure. It's parent pressure. It is the parents that press into the children, not the peers. But when your parents aren't pressing, you probably will be peer pressed or societal pressed. The tribe is important. It is the way Father designed it.
And, when it comes to this community thing, you gotta remember it is kind of a volunteer army, isn't it? Because no one can force you to be kind and like and love your brother and your neighbor and do what's right. The Lord designed us human beings as a creature with free will. We could do what's right and we could not. I mean, look at Cain, right? He could have been great brother to his brother, but he chose to kill him. And when you think of this tribal community thing, it's a beautiful thing when everybody's doing what is just and right, and that is what Israel was supposed to be, a nation set apart for the Lord, so that all would live according to his Torah. And yet the Torah, what is the Torah? It's instructions for life, how to be just and right and just live, have life within ourselves and stay united.
Yes, and I like how you said it, instructions for life. It's so sad what's happening in the modern world, particularly in my Western world of America, the United States. The Bible in the Western world is classified as a religious book, but the Torah is not a religious book. It's exactly what it says, instructions for life. You take, oh, it's religion. No, it's not. It's instruction for life. Just giving you life's wisdom. But you all accept that when you're reading Socrates or some doctor or psychologist. But that is the Bible. It's not about your synagogue or definitely not your mosque and not your church with a cross on top of it. That's not what the Bible, and yet that seems to be the only place where you find one or think it's spoken about. The Bible is for life outside of a religious building. It is not giving you instructions. In fact, the only religious building instruction that was ever given was when there was a temple. When there was a temple, when they were doing temple sacrifices. There's no temple. and there's no more need for sacrifices. And that was only done occasionally when it did exist. They didn't live their life for the temple. They lived their life until they did. And that's after doing Babylon, after Babylon exile, and the rabbinical priests took over and began to redefine Torah by constricting it, restricting it only in reference to the synagogue, the ritual in the temple. But that was not the. Go and read the actual Old Testament. Read it. There's very little going on in the in the temple. It's in life, and when it was going on, when you could see them putting up pagan temples, following pagan ritual practices. You were not called to do that. But of course, Christianity double downs on it, and it makes it all about the temple. Makes it all about the building on Sunday. In fact, the only people that are more temple worshipped in the modern world are Christians and Hindus. And I would have to beg to say, I don't know which one's worse, because they very much are similar.
So you know what you make me think of when you said that about the building and the. So think about it. Isn't that what the state does? Because it should be about the family and the worship of God as the Father, but instead they worship the building, the institution, the organized religion, and that's what the state does. You become children of the state, patriot. You pledge your allegiance to the flag, and the flag, it's the church, it's the building, right? So, and you can see the transition. Instead of being a family unit run by father, mother, it's all about the institution and the religious leaders, the politician leaders. It's the replacement
Yes,
of God.
of the family, of God in the family unit that He designed. During COVID, Christians were screaming bloody murder that they couldn't go into a building. They closed down the churches. And then they tried to compare themselves to Daniel. Daniel wasn't getting up, running to a building to pray. Daniel had the real persecution, not you. He was persecuted for praying in his home. And last I checked, I don't think anyone has busted through a door in America to stop you from praying in your house. Not ever in this country has that occurred, from praying in your house. Because that's the power of prayer, not going to a building to pray. Daniel, because he prayed in his house, opened up a window towards Jerusalem and was convicted. The real COVID restriction. Telling you that you can't get in your car and run to a building and you start screaming bloody murder because you can't be with a bunch of strangers. What about your house? Do you not have a house? Where there are 2 or 3 gathered in my name, I will be in the midst of them. You read that in your churches, but you don't believe it. Because you love congregating in mass crowds, because you don't do it in your own home. You're not praying, you're not waking up and singing with your children. I know you're not. I can barely mention 2 people that do that with their children. Do it faithfully.
So think about it. They have the same relations they do with grandpa as they do with the pastor. They see them once a week, listen for an hour, and go. Nobody is actually spending time with the pastor, walking with him, communicating, learning, asking questions. See, I mentioned before, you go see your grandpa once a week, once a month. But the problem is that, even when you do, it's probably you go for a dinner or a birthday party. You got 16 people sitting around the table eating coleslaw. But there's no actual quality time of interaction into deep conversation and seeking pursuit of knowledge. That kind of relationship only happens when you're in close proximity to someone. Because it's inevitable. If you live far away, you only get to see someone once a month. It's going to be somewhat of a vain, casual conversation because you don't even know each other. So how have you been? How's life? You never get to the nitty gritty actual tell me about my father, tell me where you come from, tell me about my great grandfather. That only comes from a deep relationship. When you get past this casualness of having dinner with 16 people at the table, you got to spend time and walk with them, sit with them, talk.
Well, you have to remember, but the proximity, there's something deeper because, well, proximity doesn't happen unless you want it. So the real issue is those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, meaning whosoever will. Well, why isn't there proximity? Proximity for the sake of proximity doesn't mean anything. Do you want to sit with me? Do you want me to talk to you? Are you interested in what I have to say? Or are you washing dishes while I'm talking? Miriam is sitting down and she's focused, gazing into the eyes with her ears open. Martha's trying to listen, washing and drying dishes, clanking, slamming down plates, slamming cabinet doors. And what? It's like, and then what does she do? Tell Miriam, who is sitting there, hey, why don't you come over here and help me? What? The Lord is talking. My goodness gracious, Martha, are the dishes more important? The Lord is in our house imparting wisdom. We could sit with him. Are you kidding me? Ah, and that's most of you. That is most of you. I know it. Surely, if you're honest with yourself, you know that you know it. Rather, it's grandpa or God, Abba, Godpa. You don't want to sit. You're not hungry and you're not thirsty. Your actions reveal who you are. You don't have proximity because you don't want it. And because of that, you won't get the benefit. You won't get the benefit. Seek and you shall find. You're not seeking. Knock and it shall be open. You're not knocking. Ask. You're not asking. Not asking. Not seeking. Not knocking. Not hungry. Not thirsty. Meaning you're not in God's tribe.
Well, it says in Isaiah 55, seek Adonai when he can be found. Call upon him while he is near. When you have the opportunity, while he still is available, take advantage. Don't take advantage, but take advantage. If Adonai is near, seek him wholeheartedly. Come to him. Repent, learn, grow. Don't wait until he hands you over to the desire of your heart, which is sin, and then suffer the consequences of you rejecting your Lord and Savior. Grow. Draw near unto him, and he will draw near unto you.
Ah, but you draw near. See, most are asking the Lord, but the Lord's like, wait, I'm sitting here, been waiting for you to come up. It says, come boldly before the throne of grace, where you can find help and obtain mercy in your time of need. But you're not approaching. You did for that bank loan. You did for that real estate deal. You see, for what you want to do, you will approach. You don't want the Lord. You want him on your terms, but it doesn't work that way. It's on his terms, and the bank will tell you that. It's on our terms. The system will tell you that. The IRS will tell you that. The zoning commission at your city will tell you that. It's going to be on our terms. Should've, could've, would've, can't, won't, didn't. Oh, if I only, I would've, if, it doesn't matter. Water's over the dam. Like the 90-year-old that I met, water's over the dam. 60 years, 45 years of drunkenness. By the time he was 60, he decided to finally get sober. But that's after the ruination of his children, after the ruination of his relationships, his marriages, after the ruination of the people he worked with, employees and all of the people, all of the damage, all of the people ruined and the collateral, what's done in the wake. By the time you wake up, you've already killed a few, ruined a few, destroyed a few, but abused a few. Wow, you've been busy. Now you're woke and you're hardly busy for the Lord, aren't you? Redeeming the time. You can redeem that time, but you still haven't gotten it. And I'm sad for you. Now, many of you are listening to this and you're saying, but that doesn't apply to me. Well, how could it not apply to you? Well, God did tell Abraham to leave his father's house. He did. After his father passed away in the land of Haran, the Lord will call you out from where you're at when where you're at is out of touch with him. So there are families. Saul's son, Jonathan, pretty much detached himself from his father because of his father's wickedness. So there are exceptions to this rule, all things being equal. But there are some, he says, don't do what your ancestors, don't do what your forefathers did. Yeshua said, I've come to put a sword between certain family members. And there are certain of you who you say, well, Guy, Steve, so what are you saying? I got a pretty wicked family. Well, that's different in your case. Yeshua said, who are my brother and my sisters but those that do the will of my Father? He's a mother to the motherless, a father to the fatherless, a friend to the friendless, a brother that sticketh closer than a brother. He's that friend. And he will develop a new community, a new tribe for you. Some of you have to leave that godless tribe and be grafted in, John 15, to a different tree and an adoption. So there are cases that you can become a part of that family. That's even in the Torah. You can be grafted in. What does she say? Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Some of you do need to leave your tribe, and you'll for the right reasons. So I want you to know I understand that. But the point is, where do you go and where do you choose? You have a bad wife, then you choose a worse one. You had a bad husband, then you choose a worse one. Is it really? Or are you just bored? Or are you really, is it really your tribe or is it you? It could be it could be one of each or both. One or the other or both. So you have to decide, be honest. Do you have a good tribe? The prodigal son had a good tribe. He went back to his father's house. Some of you know better to ever go back to yours or your mother's house. In fact, you even want to keep your children away from them because of what they did to you and who they are. You don't want that negative influence. You're trying to raise them up in the Lord while your family members are trying to fight against you. And then you let them babysit for you. And they start bad mouthing you while you're not around to your own children. Be careful, because some of your tribes you need to avoid.
And remember, the army of the Lord is a volunteer army. The Lord does not force anyone to join him and his family. It is your choice to forsake your wicked heritage and wicked parents and be his child. Your choice and yours alone. Choose you this day whom you will serve. As for me, my house, we will serve Adonai Tsevaot, the Lord of heaven and earth, the God and Creator of all things, the love of my life, and my best friend. Hallelujah.